Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and community. My name is Tim Bokum. I am the city traffic engineer for Oxnard, and I will be giving you the presentation on tonight's agenda item for the update of the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. Tonight's recommendation is simply that the Public Works and Transportation Committee recommend that the City Council receive and file a report on the status of the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, and then offer any comments that you feel comfortable based on that presentation. A little bit of background in case you don't know, or if someone watching the presentation doesn't know. The city's bicycle master plan dates back to 2002 when our first major bicycle planning effort was undertaken and a document prepared to sort of become our guiding principle of how we would install bicycle and pedestrian facilities. It received a rather significant update in 2011 in order to incorporate more recent design elements and design guidelines, as well as new state recommendation allowances for different types of facilities. And that document pretty much continues to be the document that we use for all of our planning and our programming elements today. It did receive a small update in 2012, but we continue to refer to the 2011 document as the current document. In 2007, obviously, it's been a while. Staff prepared and came forward with a scope of work that we could use in order to update the document. However, due to funding limitations and other issues, we were unable to move forward at that time with an update, and rather we went out and solicited for funding of other planning efforts that we can use in order to prepare ourselves for the next update, and I'll go a little bit into that later in my presentation. The plan itself establishes a rather large objective. Here is the major goal as outlined in the plan, and that quite simply is to make bicycle and walking integral modes of our transportation system here within the city, and really do that through safe, interconnected system of bicycle and pedestrian facilities throughout. How would we do that? Well, the plan does establish the following objectives. And I won't read these verbatim, but I have highlighted some of the more important concepts in the objectives. Improve and expand pedestrian and bicycle facilities, generally through focusing on improved connectivity within the city. Provide more direct connections between major activities centers, such as employment and retail areas. Improve bicycle and pedestrian access and safety. That's obviously a very important objective and goal that we need to continue to strive for. An interesting objective is to adjust our culture to recognize that bicycle and pedestrian facilities just aren't recreationally facilities, aren't recreational oriented. They need to become integral parts of our transportation system per se. And that really does mean integrating them in our street system as best we can. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally, a major effort to increase our bike and pedestrian mode share for greenhouse gas emission, climate action plan advancement, as well as sustainability. Just wanted to talk a short period of time on nomenclature that you will hear in the presentation. There are various ways that we refer to various bicycle facilities. Class 1 is commonly referred to as a separate path of travel for bikes, possibly including pedestrians in a mixed-use type of path setting. They are entirely separated from roadways. They may be along a roadway, but they're not within the roadway, but they give a fully separated facility for usage by bike and peds. Class 2 facilities, commonly referred to as bicycle lanes, use markings in a street roadway in order to establish clear areas where a bicycle should be separated from vehicles that are traveling in the vehicle right away or parked along a street. and those are commonly referred to as bike lanes. Class 3s are what are commonly called bicycle routes or boulevards. And these are really corridors that connect various areas throughout the city that roadways may not be wide enough to provide specific marked area and separated areas within the road, or enough right-of-way or public property in order to do a Class 1 facility. So we install signage and sometimes street markings in there to really connect these areas through routes and shared facilities as shown. The master plan also contains other elements besides just projects. The Appendix A is a rather important piece of the document and includes significant design guidelines for use by city staff and others when we look at how to implement and design our bike and peds facilities. There's just 2 examples of those design guidelines. On the left, you'll see some examples on how to create those bicycle lanes, those Class 2 facilities as they would come. You can see in the middle that it's providing specific space for bicycle ridership, separating out parking vehicles and the through traffic, giving them really defined space to make it safe. And then on the right, a concept of sharing the road where a road may not be wide enough to put those lanes in. The use of sharrows or other techniques in order to let bicyclists know where they should be, vehicle drivers know that there could be bicycles along the corridor, and then to really avoid safety issues such as the door zone here, where a parker may be opening their door in that zone, and an unsuspecting bicyclist may come into conflict. You couldn't have a bicycle master plan without having projects, and our plan certainly has those. We have approximately 110 linear miles identified in that plan. Though you can see in the lower left here, the legend identifies both existing and proposed facilities for each one of those classes, Class 1 through 3. And then whether they're solid or dashed, that they were in existence or proposed at the time. And on the right here, you'll see sort of how it lays out, fairly equal in linear miles between the facilities. The one thing I would comment on is many of the Class 1 paths, even though are significant miles, they do require significant efforts to install, whereas the Class 2 bike lanes often are within existing streets and are much easier and more affordable to put in. And so I'll give you some examples of how we do that. And then all of these projects, the plan looks to try and prioritize those based on various factors such as points of interest, schools, barriers to connectivity, shopping, those type of things, and gives a listing of those priorities for consideration by the council for funding programming. Here is an example of one of the projects. This is pulled right from the plan. It's regarding bicycle improvements along C Street. I chose this one because we just recently completed much of these improvements. This is just one segment of the work that we did. But the plan really tried to anticipate what was necessary in order to improve the corridor as a complete street, a multimodal street. And you can see up in the upper right, their recommendations at the time were to look at shared lane markings in areas, get better route signings, bicycle signal detection, upgrading our vehicle detection to videos, those type of things. And then down on the left here was just a concept. Ultimately, through additional design efforts, C Street is a mixture of Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 facilities, and it was recently completed last month, and that was approximately about 5 miles of improvements that we did. This is a list of some of the more significant projects that we've completed since 2012. It's not a full list, but it's some of the more important ones that we wanted to show. Obviously, I just mentioned C Street and its rather long length of 2 and Class 3, but also some of the other ones that are important to mention. Victoria Avenue, the Class 1 facility that was completed north of Gonzales to allow access up to the Gumtree area. The Class 2 facility on Victoria that basically connected Gonzales down to Teal Club to the existing bicycle route lanes that were there is a significant corridor improvement along a major gateway to the city. And then other projects that were done that look to install Class 2 facilities when they were done. Roughly 9 miles of improvements in this table, which is a good amount of improvements within the time frame we're talking about. We also had other more recent projects that included bicycle facility and pedestrian facility updates. Most of these projects were related to street resurfacing projects that were underway or private development projects that may be coming forward. Again, C Street is mentioned because of the ability and our accomplishment of getting better bike lanes in, sharrows, the green paint in order to separate out conflict areas. And then really a couple others to mention, the Rice Street and Rose Street resurfacing that took place earlier this summer, and the creation of not only additional bike lanes, but the buffered bike lanes, protected areas, greater marking, additional green paint. Anytime we have a resurfacing project come forward, we look to upgrade those facilities for complete streets components, including bicycle ped and other issues. Pardon me. And here's just a couple of examples of how we accomplished those. This is one example on Vineyard Avenue that was completed about 3 years ago. On the left-hand side, you'll see the former condition where we did have a bike lane there, but it was somewhat discontinuous. It approached an intersection where a right turn lane existed, and yet we didn't have it continue through that intersection. On the right, you can see the improvements that we made, not only improving the bicycle lanes there, but marking with green paint to denote the conflict area between right turning traffic, and then creating the bicycle slots at the intersection to give them their own specific area to pass through and not have them with conflicts with the right turning traffic. Similarly, at that time, Patterson, we did a paving project there. On the left, you'll see prior to our work, there was really no bike facilities on the road. We actually had signage that in some areas encouraged bicyclists to get up onto the sidewalk and separate from peds, mostly because bicyclists didn't feel comfortable riding along the street. Post conditions, we installed full Class 2 bicycle lanes along these segments, and then literally installed buffered areas to get separation between the vehicles and the bicycles, creating specific space for them to operate safely along the corridor. And then one final example of how simple an upgrade can be. This is a paving project that took place on 5th Street. You can see that we did have bike lanes prior. This is looking eastbound on 5th Street. So there was areas for them to ride along the street. However, what we did when we paved was create additional lines to push the parkers up against the curb, give the bikes more defined space, and then increase the markings out there to really show both the motorists and the bicyclists where they should be to improve safety and guidance. We obviously have a lot of project and programs on the way. And so this next part of the presentation, we'll talk about some of the significant work that we have going on. Just a lot of work. Obviously, one of the most significant things is the recent passage of Measure E and the council and community's investment into infrastructure improvements is allowing us an opportunity for including bicycle and pedestrian improvements as part of our resurfacing and other projects. I'll talk a little bit about that. We've been out soliciting and receiving significant grant funds for other efforts, and we'll talk a little bit about those. Parallel efforts that staff is working on is improving our signal timings along specific corridors to improve bicycle and ped safety. And then the two major planning efforts that I'll talk about that will lead to our ultimately the bicycle and pedestrian master plan update, our local roadway safety plan development, as well as our sustainable transportation plan. This table, table 3 of your staff report, simply identifies some of the major resurfacing projects that are going to be taking place in 2022 That's next calendar year. All of these facilities allow us the opportunity to review them and incorporate some of those design features that I showed on previous slides. Look at getting better complete streets integration on these facilities, upgrading for vehicle detection, bicycle detection, those type of things. Roughly about 9 miles of potential improvements that we would incorporate, and probably more significant ones along this: Gonzales Road, Cooper Road, La Colonial green alleys. I'll show some slides on those. Those are all coming forward. This map simply shows those projects that are coming forward. A lot of work that's underway, and as part of each one of these areas, we will be reviewing and incorporating improvements when and where we can, both in neighborhoods as well as our arterial streets. I just wanted to pick one example to give you an idea of what we're currently considering. Patterson Road, south of Woolley, is south of 5th Street, is scheduled for resurfacing. As part of that, south of the roundabout, which is a single lane roundabout, we actually have 4 lanes of traffic that exist out there. This roadway is the subject of significant complaints about speeding and pedestrian crossing issues, those type of things. So as part of this, we are considering making changes in order to make it a more complete street project. And we would do that by doing things like potentially converting over the 2nd lane to a buffered, separated bicycle facility. The volumes along Patterson are such that we don't have a capacity issue out there, and so we would be looking at a better way to utilize the large amount of asphalt that we have out there. And then at intersections along that corridor, such as here at Orfish, which is a location of quite a few complaints, get better channelization like we were talking about, and other elements that would allow the bicycle safe passage through there, better visibility from the side streets, more defined passive travel, those type of things in order to implement the elements of the bicycle master plan. A very exciting project that is actually starting construction is the La Colonia Green Alley project. This is our first green alley project of the Green Alley Master Plan, and it looks to make improvements out along facilities connecting Cesar Chavez Ramona Elementary School to various areas of the neighborhood. It does that by basically making modifications in the alleys and the adjacent street system to clearly define and separate out some of the uses. These are actually concept figures from the Green Alley Master Plan, and you can see that in each one of the alleys, the concept is to separate out clear walking areas, biking and driving areas, and then when we cross streets, to give better traffic calming features and enhancements to give better passage for bikes and peds. This is just one example of that project. This is the alley that parallels Cooper, that basically connects Cesar Chavez here to the right into the neighborhood. And you can see that as part of the project that is going to construction, we'll be resurfacing the alley, creating a new smooth surface, giving bicycles and cars their own one-way travel area. And then we will have area for pedestrian passage, including bulb outs and crosswalks in order to cross the streets. We've also been out soliciting and receiving significant state and federal assistance on implementation. This is just a partial list of many of the projects that we've been successful in receiving funding for. I'll go into some of these, but you can see that we have approximately just under $10 million in grants coming forward for this small list, about 9 miles of work that's being included. And these are projects that we have funding for and are in design and going towards construction. One of the big ones is the Northeast Area Community Bikeway and Pedestrian Project. And this figure basically shows how we will be utilizing bicycle routes and lanes in order to connect areas of the neighborhood of La Colonia and to the north. The green areas are bike routes that will be conducted through those areas. The red is Class 2, and this project is currently under design and scheduled to go to construction in 2023. As part of that, we are looking to upgrade Cooper Road and make major investments in establishing a Class 2 facility from Oxnard Boulevard all the way over to Cesar Chavez. This project has received grant funding in order to do the bicycle and pedestrian improvements, but relies on our resurfacing funding in order to resurface the roadway, in order to get it smooth, in order to complete the improvements. And this project is scheduled to be completed next year when the water project is completed. Similarly, those bike routes that are identified in green, similar to what you've seen out along C Street and some of the others that have moved recently, establishing clear corridors where bicyclists know that they should be if they're trying to get from point A to point B. And that's through a mixture of shared markings in the roadway and the bike route signs. On the left here, you'll see Garfield and Entrada, where we are planning on making those improvements. Pretty big investment in trying to accomplish connectivity is looking at opportunities along 3rd Street. As you can see in the current picture, the way that we currently have the area striped, we have in some sections 4 lanes of travel, in some sections 3, but currently no ability to put in bicycle lanes out there. We're looking at modifying that in order to get a better bicycle connection between downtown and Rose Avenue. And this is really the concepts that we are developing. They're not yet complete, but we would look at establishing buffered bike lanes up and over the bridge, 3rd Street Bridge, continue that through the neighborhood past the warehouse plants. We would have Class 2 bicycle lanes, the entire section, and then we would have a mixture of 1 lane in each direction with the turn pocket, and then widen the road to 2 lanes in each direction as we get closer to Rice in order to accomplish that. This project's under design and anticipated to begin construction in 2023. It says 2022 there, but it really is 2023. Very significant award that we got recently was about $2 million, just under $2 million for Safe Route to School improvements. This is very exciting. It's one of the first major grants that we've gotten to really focus on our school issues. As part of that, we received funding for developing 26 plans for 26 schools to sort of show how we want to get our pedestrian and bicyclists safely to and from school. And that's by developing a plan where it clearly demarks where they should be walking and riding to, and then making changes in the infrastructure to upgrade crosswalks, signage, markings, those type of things, and then promote those with school children. This map shows those areas. The green and the blue are our current projects that we received funding for. The ones in gray are our phase 2 areas that we have yet to receive funding for. But phase 1 includes roughly 26 schools, of which 6 would have received construction funding to do both, do the planning effort, as well as do the installation of improvements. And what's really important about that is those 26 schools represent almost 27,000 students in enrollment and about 15,000 that live along those corridors that will benefit from these improvements. One example, Ramona and Cesar Chavez. This is a concept plan that was submitted for the grant and received award. It looked at not only upgrading the traffic control along there, but also doing bulb outs and new handicap ramps, installing rapid reflective beacons for assistance. This project has been funded, and it has really been funded to make permanent some of the more recent work that we just completed this summer. A shout out to our Public Works street staff who was able to complete this work. and upgrade all of the crosswalks surrounding Ramona School to high visibility crosswalks. We installed additional signage out within the roadway, additional striping and channelization to square up the intersection, all improvements to get done. And similarly on First Street, installed a four-way stop at that location and really demarked the corridors to and from the school. The grant project will make all that permanent and actually put in more permanent facilities. And so that is scheduled to be under design and delivered in 2022. 4 other schools may be of interest as part of that grant. Harrington Elementary, Kamala, Lemonwood Elementary all received funding for construction, plan development and construction, as well as Fremont Middle School. And those will all be moving forward in the next year. As I mentioned, a parallel effort to some of our road work is our signal work. And as part of that, we're looking to continue to make timing improvements out along our corridors and other investments for detection. Most notably, we're reviewing our pedestrian and signal timing to make sure that we have appropriate clearance times and walk times for pedestrians to get through the streets. And we're also looking at better ways to detect our bicycles and our pedestrians out. And on the lower right-hand side, you can see the use of what's called video detection. These are camera units that replace the need for in-ground loop detection, and they can provide better detection in certain conditions, as well as data collection and other types of things. We are having to break this project down into corridors, and so we're looking at implementing improvements along Rose and Gonzales this year and next, and then moving on to other corridors in 2022 and 2023. If you want more information on the projects, all of that information is started in our CIP document, and whether it's the 4th Street mobility improvements, C Street facilities, Edding Road, any of the ones on these slides, you can find that information in the CIP. And if you have questions, you can reach out to staff and we can respond when you'd like. Finally, just a real quick discussion on education efforts. Education is mostly conducted by Oxnard Police Department, both with the existing operational needs and efforts, as well as going out and acquiring Office of Traffic Safety grants for things such as community outreach, grants that fund rodeos and helmets, education presentations. They do spot enforcement and distracted driver training through these efforts. And one of the more important things, exciting things, is in July, we were able to hold our first major bicycle rodeo at the Crossroads Center in River Park. This was well attended by children, and basically police officers and other members of the community helped train them in safe riding techniques and those type of things. Finally, I just wanted to talk about the bicycle pedestrian master plan update needs. As I mentioned previously, in 2017, we were working on a scope of work to update the plan, but funding was we were lacking funding, so we could not move forward. And instead, we developed and went out and tried to access, and were successful in accessing funding for other planning efforts that are coming through that will offer assistance when we get to our next bicycle and pedestrian master plan update. And those two planning efforts are really the development of our first local roadway safety plan and our first sustainable transportation plan. These were recent grants that we received, roughly about $130,000 for our roadway safety planning effort, which is just kicked off and underway, and about $460,000, a rather large sum of money, in order to develop our sustainable transportation plan, and that's also underway. What is the local roadway safety plan? Well, in essence, it's a document that we use in order to identify safety along our roadways and at intersections. We do that by analyzing a certain amount of accident data and other factors This project is looking to try and establish at least 5 years of clear data that we can use in order to focus our efforts, generate ideas for solutions for each one of these, prioritizing projects and locations. And it really sets the stage for seeking grant funding and programming needs for the council and the community, and help us respond better to complaints that come in and how they come in. That document and that process is underway, and we will be seeing community presentations and workshops later this year and in 2022, with the completion of that project and that plan in 2022. The second effort is the development of the city's first sustainable transportation plan. This document basically looks to deliver a better and longer-term sustainable plan for the city, uniting various plans such as the circulation element, the bicycle master plan, climate action plan issues, connecting neighborhoods citywide, points of interest citywides, focusing on disadvantaged communities in order to remove barriers out there, outreaching to all community members and stakeholders, rather than just focusing on bikes and peds and vehicles. We're looking at other issues such as access and those type of things. And then this is all to develop a better plan in order to upload the policies and the projects into our general plan update, which is scheduled to kick off in 2022 and 2023. This project, as I said, is underway, and we will be having community workshops later this year in early 2022. And it's scheduled for a longer completion timeline, but ultimately up for council consideration, final consideration sometime in early 2023. So how do those two plans affect the bicycle master plan update? Well, this is just a simple graphic on how we anticipate it possibly working, utilizing both the local roadway safety plan as well as the sustainable transportation plan to upload information and new policies and recommendations into the circulation element update, of which part would be the bicycle master plan and pedestrian master plan. And then that, of course, would then upload into our overall general plan with modified policies, goals, and objectives of the larger citywide planning tool and document. So what are the next steps? Council and the community can offer input at any time on the bicycle and master plan or any of the various CIPs that the city is bringing forward. As I've mentioned, the local roadway safety plan and STP are currently underway with major efforts that are occurring, so stay tuned for those. The short-range transit plan efforts of the 26 schools and other issues are being kicked off later this year in early 2020, with the anticipated completion of the construction components dating up to 2023 and 2024. And then, of course, all of the projects that are in the tables and the CIP, we're continuing to design, bid, and construct those at various stages and timeframes. Financial impacts. Well, there's no direct financial impact of the bicycle master plan. It does include, obviously, significant financial investments into infrastructure and programs for the city, but there's no direct financial impact of receiving this update or anything associated with that. Rather, a continued effort of funding by the council through various funding sources as well as grants in order to deliver those projects and programs. That completes the presentation. I appreciate your concentration, and we are available to answer any questions.